justice for the citizens, not justice for the people who are abusing our privileges, our rights, and abusing the Constitution. So, guys, your microphones are hot. Go ahead.
Yeah, what I'd like to do, Anthony, we are noticed by numbers, and we all have to stand together, and we have to generate the numbers. And along with the numbers comes strength, because within those numbers are individuals that have extraordinary capabilities. And that's where I met Ross. From your show, it led to me getting in connection with Ross, who I've seen his work in the prisons represented by attorneys that he worked for as a legal researcher. And he's done a lot of the writings that these lawyers signed off on. And he has had a lot of successes. And so with that, I would like to introduce Ross and let Ross tell you some of the things, where we're going and where we're at, and what he's doing.
Hi. Well, let me tell you a little bit about my background real quick. I got involved in law because I bought a brand new car, and the first one and only one I ever bought. And before I even made my first payment, I got hit by a guy who was driving on a revoked driver's license with fictitious plates on his car. And he hit me and knocked all the windows out of my car and bent the frame and flattened all the tires. That's how hard he hit me. And I got cited for the accident. In a 45-mile-an-hour zone, he skidded for 120 feet, then he flipped sideways, went up in the air, flew for 20 feet, skidded for another 30 feet, and hit me. Well, it can be is because I was at an uncontrolled intersection. I was making a left-hand turn, but I got stuck in the middle, and basically he just came from over a mile away from a complete stop and just drove into me. Anyway, I wanted to represent myself. I had a friend from law school that was visiting me that I used to be my roommate in college, and I said, hey, take me down to the law library and kind of help me out here a little bit. I got a case, So I prepared my own memorandum of law for my case, and trial memorandum, and the judge dismissed my case. So I was feeling kind of proud of myself, and then what happened is I called my insurance company and told them, I said, hey, I won. They dismissed my case, and they said, well, you didn't win. You have to be found not guilty. So in other words, I have to be tried and I have to be found not guilty. But when I submitted my brief that showed all these things that were going on, the district attorney's office said, well, we don't want to prosecute it. And the judge said, well, I can't make them force them to prosecute you. So you're just stuck with the dismissal. So I ended up being driver number one anyway. And so he got his car completely fixed. And of course my insurance company spent $12,000 fixing my car. And of course the problem is that they stole the heads off my car. The engine blew 6 months after I got it back. It was just a nightmare. So I got interested in the law. I found it fascinating, and then I started studying on my own from time to time. Then I finally met a lawyer. I read an article in the paper that says, Attorney Cold Cock's Judge. I said, now that's the kind of guy I'd like to work for, because he don't take nothing from nobody, right? And he did. Amen. It was in the paper.
Amen.
So I went to his office. I said, hey, I want to go to work for you. I've been studying. I think I'm kind of like a paralegal kind of guy, And he said, no, I'll tell you what. If you had a 2-year degree as a legal assistant, I'd hire you. And I said, that's God's word. You swear on it. And I said, if I had a 2-year degree as a legal assistant, you'd hire me on the spot. He goes, oh, on the spot. So I said, okay. So I went to the community college and I got my 2-year degree in 2 semesters. I did 45 credits in 2 semesters, transferred 20 over from UNLV, graduated, walked into his office 9 months later, and I said, I'm ready to go to work. He looked at me and said, oh, you're crazy, you didn't give it to me. I said, here it is, here's my diploma, here's my transcript. And he went, whoa. So he hired me. I worked for him for 13 years. And so that particular attorney was an expert on DUIs. So I worked for him for quite a while, and he gave me a lot of authority in his office. I ended up doing a lot of the writing with him. Of course, the problem with a lot of attorneys is they'll never admit that the people that work underneath them did, their work. You know what I'm saying?
Paralegals do most of the work.
Right. Well, yeah. And there's sort of like two levels. It's like the paralegals are sort of like people that answer the phone, and people that can look stuff up or make calls or write letters that are form letters and just fill them in. Those are paralegals. But the legal assistants are a little higher than that. They're sort of like you have barristers and you have solicitors. So really, a legal assistant is supposed to have better training and be able to do more research, be better at it, and do writing as well. Paralegals don't necessarily do any writing, but some of them do. It just depends on what your level of training is. And so I ended up being involved. I worked 13 years for this guy. I had 2 vacations in 13 years. And when they started, he would walk up to my desk and say, when you get done with this at about 8 or 9 or 10 o'clock tonight, your vacation starts. I didn't get to pick my vacations. So I was chained to my desk, basically. And then I went to work for another law firm, and I had 0 vacations in 12 years. And the reason for that is because I ended up doing all of their appellate writing. And I wrote over, for one attorney, I wrote over 77 Supreme Court appeals. And we won some. We lost quite a few, but most of them were court appointed and post-conviction cases. I've only won one of those in 25 years. So, they're very, very hard to win, unless you keep going with them all the way up, But anyway, that's my background. So I got 25 years of experience in research and writing, and I've even lectured other attorneys. I used to teach the public defender's office DUI classes and how to win and things of that nature. So I had my skill levels were pretty high at that time. And then the other attorney that hired me, he'd never filed even one Supreme Court appeal, so I did 2 of them for the first 2 that he ever did, and I won both of them for him. So anyway, I have a lot of experience in that area, and I have a very eclectic background as well. So I have a wide range of experience in different things in life. I don't want to go into those, but I wanted to kind of now turn to some of the facts. Like, for instance, I was talking to Gary. I went over just to talk for about 10-15 minutes to look at his documents, to authenticate them, to see if he was, talking on the side of his neck or what. And I can tell you, we spent 6 hours together. I went through all of his documents. I consider all of them authentic. His arguments are solid, in my opinion. And he talked to me about his gold mine, and he was very upset about it. And I said, well, here's the problem. Harry Reid's Mormon Mesa area of critical concern, or area, it doesn't exist, because in 1866, Congress, both houses of Congress, both House and Congress granted and ceded the land in Clark County, which at that time, because Clark County used to be truncated, it was flat on the bottom. And they ceded that land, which is now Clark County. It used to be the Arizona Territory, or a remnant of it, because Arizona Territory was, across the river as well. So they gave that to the state of Nevada. Okay. Now, the thing that's special about that is it also, by the way, included the southern tip of my county, which I think encompasses Pahrump. So there's no federal land in Pahrump. There's no federal land in Clark County. Okay. Unless the state has ceded it back to the federal government. Now, when I did my research on Dallas Air Force Base and on Lake Mead, they were never properly ceded. So those are still state lands. Although the feds exercise jurisdiction over them, they have no authority. The federal government has no police powers within the boundaries of the state. None. 0. Everything goes back to the sheriff. There's Supreme Court cases on this issue, but the most important thing to remember here is that I perused Cliven Bundy's complaint. And Cliven Bundy's complaint says that in 1852, as a result of the Guadalupe Hidalgo Treaty between Mexico, the government of Mexico, and the government of the United States, that land out there called Gold Butte, where he was grazing his cattle, was ceded to the federal government and has never been ceded ever since. Now, it has. in 1866. I have a copy of the Congressional Act, and I'll make it available to you if you want. But the most interesting thing about this federal act is this. It only reserves the mineral rights and the mining rights. It doesn't reserve the water rights, and it doesn't reserve anything else. It doesn't reserve the public lands, nothing.
Right,
So,
the water goes to the land.
well, not necessarily, okay, and the reason for that is under the Desert Land Act, the federal government severed the water from the land. Okay, now the question is, when did the Desert Land Act come into existence? Okay, well, it didn't come into existence in 1866, I can tell you that. It was much, much later. And this is, I'm monitoring a case right now by some Pahrump and Knight County residents. And it's a water case, and it's called Basta. The actual head note is Basta versus and Frank Maurizio versus Jason King, the state water engineer. Now, the same thing's happening on all levels of government. Here, the Attorney General's office is arguing that the state engineer has jurisdiction over private wells. They're saying that, well, we're natural persons, and when we look at the statutes that delegates your authority, it doesn't say natural persons in there. It says government entities. It says, municipalities or even utility companies, and the U.S. government is included in there as well. So the state has argued back that, well, they're included because this one statute over here says that we can use the statute as a definition of a person, because the person is defined in the statutes under Jason King, and none of them include a natural person. And the interesting thing is that they had a nerve in their answering brief at the Supreme Court to knowingly and intentionally lie to the Supreme Court and say that this is the way it works, when in fact the definition of a natural person was taken out of the definition of persons in 1985 when Jason King had authority. So, how do you do that? In law, in interpretation of statutes, they say the expression of one thing is the exclusion of another. So if you say one thing, you see what the government's doing is, it doesn't say that they're not in there, so they just say, well, then they're in there. You're in there because it doesn't say that we can't put you in there. So if it doesn't say we can't do it, we can do whatever we want. And this is the problem. That's not how statutory interpretation works. If it doesn't say you can do it, and you're a government entity, you can't do it. Now, these guys are having some problems up there. The court insisted they get an attorney, a pro bono attorney appointed. So they were able to find a local attorney here in Pahrump that was willing to go up and argue their case. But what they did is they used the attorney under his professional license, and then these guys are pro se, and they used the attorney's license to turn around and start beating them up with all these motions and saying some of your cites are incorrect, and you're being disingenuous, and you're actually committing a fraud upon the court. And so they got the opening brief kicked out, and it had to be redone. They refiled it. It's already up there today and arrived at the Supreme Court, my understanding is. So we'll see what happens now. But they fired their attorney and went back to pro se because the rules are different. Pro ses have to be given some leeway, but all the corrections, they say, were made, and so it's just like an attorney would have done it, and things have been corrected, and actually even made better. So we'll see what's going to happen here. But so far, they've said that a person is included because they want it included. So we're going to use this statute over here to include it, and that is again a crock. But well, it's worse than massaging. It's just clear and blatant lying. And then the other aspect is that the the issue here is about land patents as well, not just the water, but the land patents and the kind of water it is. If it's percolating water, which is water that has no known course and seeps through the soil, I don't know, some of you guys out here, everybody has a well out here, so you might be familiar with that. That's called percolating water, and that is part of the land. That's owned by the person that owns the land. So why would you need the state engineer's permission to dig a well or drill a well and take part of your land out? I mean, you own it. if you own the mineral rights of your land, you don't need permission from the government to drill an oil well, do you? I mean, I mean, you might need some safety things or something, but I think that it's your oil, so you don't need to pay them for permission to, you know, in other words, they don't get a piece of the pie just because, you know, yeah, they're the government, which seems to be the ongoing thing in Nevada. It's taxation without representation, basically, is what it is. I mean, this is even more egregious than the Tea Party back in the days of the colonial times. And speaking of that, we can get into that subject too. The fact that we have now become colonial citizens, and we're being treated like that now ourselves. But that's another, probably a talk for another show that we get into. But they've alleged that the land patents, that when you have a land patent, that's the only secure title to land. Everything else is second to that. You know, it's basically a shadow of a land patent. A land patent that's the only thing that you can have that is actually 100% secure. And in the land patents, the federal government issued the land patents for the land in Nevada, and then they issued them to the state reissued them, and guess what? You're a successor in interest to whoever owned the land patent before you. And the interesting thing is, the state of Nevada never reserved any water rights in their land patents that they issued. None. Now later on, some of them they did, but the issue is years ago in the early 1900s, the state of Nevada made a deal with the federal government. They traded 5 million acres of state land for 2 million acres of select land. It's called the State Select Act. Okay, and what happened is they got to pick and choose the 2 million acres they wanted. And some of the stuff that they owned was up on a mountainside, and really what it was is for the schools, the land that they were going to be allowed for the schools, and that they have to allow a certain portion for every section. And so they did that, and they issued the patents. Well, the state is arguing that, well, these are all desert land entry patents. 96.5% of the patents in Pahrump are state select land patents, and they're up there at the Supreme Court arguing that they're not.
Now, as a result of what Ross is saying, and us meeting as a result of your show from a citizen listening, brought us together in a collaborating effort, because the statutes that they're trying to use, they're not legal or lawful or constitutional.
In the first place.
In the first place.
Yeah. So we.
With your